and Western Alliance, Warsaw and NATO Pact. The course will also describe the shock therapy and its consequences. So in this course, we will be covering what happened post World War II, how did the Soviet Union system emerge, and what are the factors that led to the disintegration of USSR. We will also highlight the alliances that existed between the Eastern and the Western societies. It will also describe the post consequences after the disintegration of USSR and the shock therapy. What happened after the shock therapy? Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section.
Welcome to this section, the topic web of the course. In this course, we will make you first go through the introduction, followed by the Berlin Wall, the Soviet system, economic system of Soviets and the political system. Then we study about the history of the USSR. How did USSR get disintegrated? We also focus on the consequences after disintegration. Then we study about shock therapy. And we conclude the course by understanding the relation between Russia and India. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section.
Welcome to this section, the introduction part, the Berlin Wall and the unification of Germany. In 1989, the people of Berlin took down the Berlin Wall, which had been constructed during the Cold War and served as the most enduring symbol. You can see the picture where the people are standing on the Berlin Wall. They're showing their happiness. So this happened in 1989. Now, what are the conditions that made for the construction of the Berlin Wall? What is this Cold War impact? What are the countries that are involved in the Cold War? We are going to discuss. The wall was built in the year 1961 to separate East Berlin from the West Berlin. It is a wall which is constructed to separate east and the western parts of Berlin in order to create a division between the capitalist and communist worlds. So the main purpose of building this wall in the year 1961 was to create a division between the capitalist and communist worlds. The event was followed by one of the most dramatic events of the history, the collapse of the Second World War and the end of Cold War. These are the most dramatic incidents. Why historians call these as the most dramatic events? Because there are so many twists and turns which happened post World War II. As a result of this dramatic event happened in the history, Cold War came to an end. A similar dramatic and historic sequence followed shortly after the Second World War. After the Second World War, Germany was united. The German Democratic Republic became a federation or a federal republic of Germany to form the reunited nation of Germany. The whole purpose of building the Berlin Wall is to divide the East and the Western Germany, then create a split between the capitalist and the communist worlds. But after the Second World War, Germany formed as the Federal Republic of Germany and it became reunited nation as a single nation of Germany. Also, followed by that, 8 East European members of the Soviet bloc experienced mass demonstrations against the communist regimes and their governments were overthrown. Eventually, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics or Soviet Union fell apart on its own. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section.
Welcome to this module on what was the Soviet system. The Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, that is USSR, was formed after the Russia's Socialist Revolution in 1917. Post 1917, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic was formed. The revolution was sparked by socialist ideals and the desire for more equal society as opposed to capitalism. So what are the socialist ideas that has sparked the revolution in Russia in 1917 was socialist ideals. Now what are these socialist ideals? They desired for equal society which is completely opposite against the capitalism. Capitalist ideology is being opposed in socialist ideology. That is the main ideology. So here society will be considered as more equal and society will own the property, no individual properties. That is the main socialist philosophy or socialist ideology. The system believed in the abolishment of private property and the creation of society based on equality. So, in the socialist ideology, there is no space for private property. They want to abolish private property concept. The designers of the system, the state and the party designed it in such a way that they acquired prominence among them all. So here in the Soviet model of system, we don't have space for private property. It is based on equality in the entire society. They designed in such a way that the state and the party will have equal prominence or more prominence when compared to any other aspect. In the picture, you can see here Lenin, Stalin, Karl Marx pictures you can see here. Who gave these ideas, who spread these ideas, and here you can see the map, the spreading of Union of Soviet Socialist Republics before 1989, 1917 to 1989 it existed. Afterwards it got disintegrated. The Soviet system was entirely dominated by the Communist Party with no room for any other players. So only one party existed, that is the Communist Party. So they did not allow any other political parties to exist. So here it is very clearly mentioned for us that there is no room for any other players. Here the players means the party system. The existing government had firm grip, very strong grip on the economy too, and they dictated every aspect of it. So Communist Party used to have a strong grip on the economy as well, and they used to control every aspect of the economy. So the party which controlled is Communist Party. There is no other political party here. Even the economy of the government is controlled by the party itself, and they used to dictate terms and conditions for the economy also. The Eastern Europe has got liberated by the Soviet army during the World War II, and later it got annexed by USSR just after the war. The eastern part of Europe, that is this region, which got liberated with the support of the USSR army, also was annexed into USSR after the war. All these countries were influenced by the political and economic system that is being followed in the Soviet Union. As they received the help from the Soviet Union army, they could not resist, and as the Soviet army was very powerful, they were annexed into the Soviet Union, and they were directly influenced by the political and the economic system of the Soviet Union. The countries in this bloc were collectively referred to as Second World countries, having Soviet Union as their de facto leader. The First World countries are the capitalist countries. So, the Second World countries are the Soviet countries under the leadership of Soviet Union or USSR. All these countries were held together by a military alliance named Warsaw Pact. This pact was signed in the year 1955, which was a counterpact of NATO. North Atlantic Treaty Organization was signed. So, in order to counter this one, the Soviet Union signed a pact, an alliance called Warsaw Pact in the year 1955. So, this is the Soviet Union system. What was their system? Their system was based on communist ideology. What is a communist ideology? No private property. Everything is owned by the state. They want to create a society based on equality, and only Communist Party is allowed. No other parties are allowed. Communist Party used to control the politics and the economy also. So once the European region, that is the eastern part of Europe, which received the help during World War II from the Soviet Union and got liberated from World War II, later they were annexed to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and these all countries were known as Soviet Union or Second World nations, and their leader is Soviet Union. Their de facto leader is Soviet Union. These all countries were held together by a military alliance named Warsaw Pact, which was signed in the year 1955. Stay tuned. We'll catch you on the other side of the section. Welcome to this module on why USSR posed as a significant global player. What made USSR to pose as a significant global player? The Soviet Union rose to prominence as a major global power after the Second World War. After the victory of Second World War, Soviet Union rose to prominence as one of the major global player with the result. As you are aware of the result, they won the World War against the Axis powers. The Soviet economy was advancing at a much higher rate than rest of the world, except the economy of the United States. So as economically it grew much stronger and the growth rate of economy is very high when compared to rest of the world except in US, this started to play a dominant role in the international politics. Why the Soviet Union's economy was advancing at much higher rate? That is because of the resources such as oil, iron and steel which were abundant in the country, and manufacturing sector produced the machinery, transported the goods to and from the country's outlying areas with efficiency. So first thing, post Second World War, they emerged as a great power. Secondly, they have lot of resources such as oil, iron and steel. They also had good manufacturing sector, producing good amount of machinery and transporting the goods. And thirdly, they have good improvement or advancing in the economy with a very higher rate when compared to the rest of the world except in the United States. These three reasons mainly made USSR to emerge as a major global player. Now the resources, as they were abundant and they were transported efficiently, consumer products ranged from pins to cars. The quality lacked the rigor of Western capitalist countries in this area. One drawback what we can see here is the quality of the products was not that great when compared to the Western capitalist countries. Though they had resources like oil, iron and steel, they were struggling with the quality of the product. Then the Soviet state also ensured a minimum standard of living for all citizens, and the government subsidized basic necessities such as health care, and there was no shortage of job opportunities. They had huge employment opportunities, basic facilities are met, they are able to transport the products. Only one disadvantage what they had was quality when compared to the Western capitalist countries. They were not able to match with the quality. Other than that, they emerged as global players. Economy was rising. They had resources, they had machinery, good transport facilities, good basic facilities are offered to all its citizens, and there was no shortage of job opportunities. This made the USSR, that is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, as a very dominant country in the international arena. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this module on how the Soviet state became increasingly oppressive. The Soviet state also controlled the land and the other productive assets, which was a dominant form of ownership. So the Soviets used to control the entire land in their state. So in the entire Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, in all the 15 republics, they had control over the land, which is a dominant form of ownership. The life of an average person became increasingly bureaucratic. So the average person's life has been controlled more by rules in an oppressive manner. There was a lack of democracy and freedom of speech, which often manifested itself in jokes and cartoons. So in reality, there was no democracy or freedom of speech to the people, those who are living in the Soviet states. All institutions were tightly controlled by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was not answerable to the people. So this clearly specifies that there is no democracy at all. So there was a party that refused to acknowledge the desire of people in all 15 Soviet republics, including the arts, to run their own affairs. So the entire control, as you can see the map here, is under the control of the Communist Party, and party refused to acknowledge the desires of the people in the 15 Soviet republics which are located here, and even to run their own arts or affairs, it has been not given any permission. However, despite the fact that the Soviet Union was composed of 15 republics on paper, Russia ruled the country and the rest of the world felt left out and even oppressed. So the entire control was under the Russia, and the other republics were only for namesake, only on paper. The Soviet Union was able to keep up with the United States in the arms race on the occasion, but at great expense. There is a huge expenditure that is need to be spent in order to keep up the race. Technologically, in terms of infrastructure such as transportation and power, the most importantly in terms of fulfilling citizens' political and economic aspirations, the Soviet Union lagged far behind the West. We can understand very clearly the motive of the party is to hold strongly on the Soviet republics. So they never bothered about the development of the infrastructure, or most importantly, fulfilling the aspirations of the citizens in political or economic fields. They lagged behind when compared to the West. This system was further weakened by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. Despite rising wages, productivity and technology in the developing world lagged far behind those in the developed nations. As a result, there was shortage of just about everything for the general public. Imports of food have risen steadily over time. By the end of the 1970s, you can observe the Soviet economy was in free fall and had all but collapsed. So finally, the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan in 1979 brought lot of troubles for the Soviet Union in the home region. Despite the rising wages, the productivity and technology in the developing world lagged far behind those in the developed world. So slowly in the late 1970s, the Soviet economy was in free fall and had all but collapsed. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this module on the economic features of the Soviet system. The Soviet system was based on socialism, where all the economic decisions were taken by the government, keeping the society in mind. As you can see the map here, in the entire territory, all the decisions pertaining to economic policies, economic decisions will be taken only by the government. with keeping in view of the overall society benefits. So government's decision on economic policies is final. The Soviet system had a planned economy. So why we are saying this as a past notation? You can see here the Soviet system had a planned economy because now the USSR, that is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, is no more in existence. We'll learn in the upcoming modules what happened and how this USSR got disintegrated. So the USSR, when it was in existence, it had a planned economy referring to the future, taking into account planning ahead with the resources which are currently available to them, and also keeping in view the future requirements. Minimum standard of living. So minimum standard of living means a situation in which a person has all those facilities without which it is difficult for him or her to develop normally. So here it is an assured thing that the minimum standard of living is present in the USSR. Unemployment is negligible or almost non-existent, not at all found in the Soviet system, because everything is under the control of the state. You can also notice here there is advanced communication system. State ownership was dominant form of ownership which was found in the USSR. State control over the land and other productive assets. The consumer industry was very advanced. They used to manufacture even a small pin to a very large item such as cars and vehicles. Huge reserves of energy resources are found in Soviet Union. They have abundantly available mineral oil, minerals, oil, iron, steel, etc. So, what are the sources or what are the economic features of the Soviet system? The Soviet system has a socialist system in which the government takes all the decisions, or the government is the owner of all the resources. It ensures the economy is planned. They have a minimum standard of living. They have unemployment negligible. They have good communication system. The state is the owner of the land, the assets, the reserves, the resources, and they have huge consumer industry where they produce a very minute item to a very large items. They have in abundance the energy resources, especially minerals, oil, iron, steel, etc. So these are the economic features or the strength of the Soviet Union or the USSR. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this section on the history of the Soviet Union. In this module, we are going to discuss about the Soviet Union and the Cold War. After the end of World War II, in 1945, two superpowers emerged in the world, as you all are aware, that is USSR and USA, of which the first was America and the second was the Soviet Union. Due to having two superpowers, the era of Cold War started in the world after the end of World War II. Both the superpowers started trying to prove themselves better than the other superpower. Though Soviet Union and the Western powers cooperated with each other during the World War II, there did not develop a spirit of real cooperation. There was no real cooperation that was existed between them. Towards the end of the war, the Soviet Union and the Western powers took opposite stands, because that's clearly evident by the end of the war. This failed to bring real cooperation and friendship. There were sharp differences among them, particularly over the treatment of anti-Nazi resistance of Poland and Yugoslavia. Coordination of the military strategy and the post-war reconstruction. So there are aspects where they have differences of opinions on the anti-Nazi resistance of Poland, Yugoslavia, coordination of military strategy and the post-war reconstruction plans. The Western powers were agitated over Russian occupation of considerable portion in the Far East. Now, what triggered the anger for the United States of America against Russia was that the occupation, a huge area of occupation in the Far East, and there also existed ideological differences between Soviet Union and Western democracies. The Western powers considered the Soviet Union as a great enemy than Hitler and Mussolini. Why did the US feel that? It is because even before the World War II came to an end, Russia started to impose the communist regimes in the East European countries such as Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary and Yugoslavia. This made USA to think that Soviet Union is a greater enemy than Hitler. The world has seen the deadliest dictator, Hitler and Mussolini, but US felt that Soviet Union is greater than them because of their actions that were done before the World War II came to an end. She also put pressure on Turkey. So USSR put pressure on Turkey and Iran to get concessions. She also engineered a communist revolution against Greece and expanded Soviet's influence even in Italy. Now, these moves of the Soviet Union were viewed by the Western powers with great concern, and the United States took up the responsibility of checking communism, the growth of communism towards the Western Europe. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this section on the history of the Soviet Union under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev took command of the Soviet Union after Joseph Stalin. The main events during his reign was the Cuban Missile Crisis, space race, launch of Sputnik, sending Yuri Gagarin into space, and building the Berlin Wall. The effects of the Cold War on the Soviet Union. High expenditure in the manufacturing of weapons. Under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev, the USSR started to spend more money in manufacturing of weapons. They lagged behind in the Western countries. The fall of economy, slow industrial growth and economic growth diverted attention from the main problems of the country. So, to sum up, the main events which took place under the reign of Nikita Khrushchev, the Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the entire world to a deadlock when the missiles were sent near to the Cuban island. Then a space race and the building of Berlin Wall. The results of this, there is a huge expenditure incurred on the manufacturing of weapons. There is fall in the economy, slow growth rate, development, and the main problems of the country are being neglected. Diverted attention from the problems of the country. We'll dig deeper in the history of the Soviet Union in the coming sections. Stay tuned. Welcome to this section on the history of the Soviet Union under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev in 1985 became the leader of the USSR. Two policies, glasnost, the openness, and restructuring, perestroika, were formulated by Gorbachev to reform the Soviet Union. So what are the two policies that were introduced by Mikhail Gorbachev in the year 1985? The two policies are glasnost and perestroika, which means openness and restructuring of the Soviet Union. They have the main objective to bring peace in the Soviet Union. So Mikhail Gorbachev's main intention in bringing two major changes of policies is to bring peace in the Union. The political reforms, he promoted democracy, he withdrew the forces from Afghanistan and Eastern Europe. He withdrew the USSR troops from Afghanistan region and Eastern Europe region, and he also helped in the unification of Germany later in 1989 when the Berlin Wall was broken down. Now coming to the financial improvements, stop the arms race. He made an attempt to promote the economic development of the Union, and he also promoted privatization. So Mikhail Gorbachev was seriously determined to bring peace in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. He wanted to promote democracy. He withdrew the forces from Afghanistan and Eastern Europe. He also made and helped for the unification of East and Western parts of Germany. He has tried to improve the financial position, attempts to improve the economic sector, promote privatization. The dissolution of the Soviet Union. As you can see the newspaper clipping here, Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader, resigns. United States recognizes republic's independence. This is a newspaper clipping of December 26, 1991. Now Gorbachev tried to reform the Soviet Union, but his efforts were completely unsuccessful. In the previous section, we learned what did Mikhail Gorbachev try to do, what are the policies he has brought, the openness and the restructuring process to bring peace in the country. But his efforts were completely unsuccessful. Those who wanted these reforms said that reforms are taking place very slowly, and those who were opposing these reforms continue to oppose them. There are two versions of Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms. Those who supported said it is going a very slow pace, and those who opposed continue to oppose them. Because of this, Gorbachev did not get the support from anywhere, neither the pro nor the opposing groups. In 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall marked the beginning of the disintegration of the Soviet Union. By 1991, the Soviet Union had completely disintegrated. What are the reasons of the dissolution of the Soviet Union? 1. Failure to fulfill the aspirations of the people. Dominant bureaucracy. Dominance of Communist Party. Heavy expenditure in the manufacturing of weapons. Lag behind when it comes to development with the Western countries. Russian dominance. Fall in the economy. Feeling of freedom in the people, and the immediate causes are like the emergence of a sense of freedom in the minds of people, and to add on Gorbachev's reforms like perestroika and glasnost. So we can come to a conclusion. It is because of the USSR focusing from the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev, spending heavy amounts of money or heavy expenditure in manufacturing of weapons, made them to divert from the main problems of USSR. It brought them downwards in the economy. It made the economy to fall, and it made people to rethink what is that is needed for them. And when Mikhail Gorbachev introduced a sense of freedom in the minds of the people, and he wanted to promote democracy, most of the people welcomed it and started to hate or dislike the Communist Party, the dominance of Communist Party. So people, when they wish for freedom, no dictators, no political parties ever in the history have survived or withstood against the wave of people's anger. Here USSR also serves as a classic, one more example. But the last leader of the USSR has made his efforts in restructuring and trying to improve the economy of the nation. He also played an instrumental role in the collapse of the Berlin Wall, end of Cold War, and finally the downfall in communism in Europe. He was also been awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in the year 1990. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this section on the history of the Soviet Union. In this module, we are going to learn about the consequences of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The end of the Cold War is one major consequence of the dissolution or disintegration of the Soviet Union. Beginning of the American supremacy. As the Cold War ended, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic got disintegrated into 15 newly independent countries. That brought the end of the two superpower rule and the Cold War. It gave an upper hand for the beginning of the American supremacy. It also ended the arms race. It ended the legacy of Soviet Union under the communist country, or Soviet Union as a communist country. It gave rise to 15 new countries. Russia became the successor of the Soviet Union. it gave a big blow to the socialist ideology and it made the capitalist ideology as the most viable one. The emergence of capitalist ideology and ban on the Communist Party in USSR itself, in their own country. Countries who got independence from the Soviet Union, most of them adopted democracy and capitalistic ideology, capitalism. Russia got all the rights which Soviet Union had, such as the permanent membership in the Security Council of the United Nations and the status of a nuclear state. All the treaties made by Soviet Union were now to be performed by Russia. These are the major consequences of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this module on the history of the Soviet Union. We will be unfolding the history of Soviet Union by checking about the regime of Joseph Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, Mikhail Gorbachev, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, that is nothing but the disintegration of the Soviet Union. What are the reasons for the dissolution and what were the consequences of the dissolution of Soviet Union? Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this section on the history of Soviet Union. In this module, we are going to look at Joseph Stalin's regime, that is from 1924 to 1953. Joseph Stalin led the Soviet Union from 1924 to 1953 and he played an important role in the development of the Soviet Union. To list out few of his major works, that is, he promoted the industries, he won the Second World War, forced the agglomeration of farming. Agglomeration is nothing but collective farming. So Stalin is known for his planned economy. He was the one who looked at agriculture as an industry that needs to be done collectively. By 1927 and 28, the towns in the Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supply. So he has noticed that there is a severe shortage of food grains by 1927-28. He in the government fixed prices at which grains must be sold. He tried to take some measures by fixing the prices, but the peasants refused to sell their grain to the government buyers at these prices because he reduced the price. So the peasants were not ready to sell it to the government buyers. Stalin, who headed the party after the death of Lenin, introduced firm emergency measures. He believed that rich peasants and traders in the country were holding stocks in the hope of higher prices. Speculation had to be stopped and supplies to be confiscated. Now he was very firm in taking measures. When he realized that the country is facing the scarcity of food grains, he took certain firm measures and he learned that rich peasants and traders are holding stocks in the countryside with a hope that in the nearby future the price will go up. what the government has reduced right now is not profitable for us. So they want to increase the higher prices. So once the price goes up, this is the speculation. It may happen, may not happen, has to be stopped and supplies to be confiscated. This is the idea of Joseph Stalin as the head of the party. In 1928, he made the party members to tour the entire grain producing areas and supervised and enforced grain collection by raiding the kulaks. Kulaks are nothing but the storehouses of the rich peasants. After 1917, the land had been given over to the peasants, and these small sized peasant farms could not be modernized. Now, Stalin also understood that as the land has been redistributed as a part of April thesis after October Revolution in 1917, the small sized peasant farms could not be modernized. In an attempt to modernize the farms and to run them along the industrial lines with machinery, it was necessary to eliminate the kulaks and take away land from peasants. He established state controlled large farms. Stalin followed this program, and this is popularly known as Stalin's collectivization program. From 1929, the party forced all peasants to cultivate in collective farms. You cannot cultivate it individually. So the bulk of the land and the implements were transferred to the ownership of the collective farms. Now, who is the owner of the collective farms? There is nothing but government. Peasants worked on the land and the kolkhos, the profit was shared. So once you work on the land, the profit will definitely be shared with the workers or the peasants. So these peasants were not happy with the decision taken by Stalin. They were not able to understand and also not willing to do Stalin's collectivization program or collective farming in simple words. The enraged peasants resisted the authorities and destroyed their livestock. Between 1929 and 1931, the number of cattle fell by 1/3 because the enraged peasants destroyed their own livestock. Those who resisted the collectivization from then were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled. As they resisted collectivization, peasants argued that they were not rich and they were not against socialism. That is the viewpoint of the peasants. They merely did not want to work in a collective farm for a variety of reasons. But this was not looked in that way by Stalin's government. Stalin's government allowed some independent cultivation but treated such cultivators unsympathetically. In spite of collectivization or collective farming, production of food grains did not increase immediately. In fact, the bad harvest of 1930s to 1933 led to one of the most devastating famines in the Soviet history, which over 4 million died. During the period of 1930 to 1933, there were severe famines, and in the history of Soviets, where 4 million people died. Many within the party started to raise their voice against Stalin. They criticized his planned economy and the consequences of collectivization. But the reaction from the Stalin and his sympathizers charged these critics with conspiracy against socialism. Accusations are made throughout the country by 1939, and over 2 million were in prisons or labor camps. Most were innocent of the crimes, but no one spoke for them. A large number were forced to make false confessions under torture and were executed. Several among them who were tortured and executed were talented professionals. Now, to sum up, Joseph Stalin, he was no doubt a very firm leader and brought development in USSR. But of course, that did not happen overnight and not without any criticisms. He has taken certain measures which were not successful, and it has costed millions of people's lives. Stay tuned. Welcome to this section on political features of the Soviet system. In the Soviet system, or in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, or the Soviet Union, any name you call by, there was only one party system, only one party rule, that is the Communist Party. Remaining all other parties' establishment is considered as illegal. Opposing capitalism, private ownership and free trade. So, in the Soviet system, they oppose capitalistic views, they oppose private ownership, and they also oppose free trade. Then what did they expect? It is that the owner of the land, the industry, is the society, and no private ownership, no free trade done by individuals, no freedom to form any other political party other than the Communist Party. Now, these political features of the Soviet system makes it a single party system which is completely opposed to capitalism, private properties or ownerships and free trade, and any kind of political party establishments are attracting strict and severe punishments. So in brief, it is only a single party system. Only Communist Party is legal party. We cannot form any other parties in the Soviet Union. So this is the key feature of the Soviet system, and as the second point clarifies, they are completely against any kind of capitalistic views, any kind of private ownership, and no question of free trade. Stay tuned. We'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this section on shock. When the Soviet Union disintegrated in the year 1991, shock therapy was created by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund (IMF) to establish the capitalist system in the newly formed countries. So this was a policy initiated by World Bank and IMF. What was the purpose of it? To establish the capitalist system in the newly formed countries. Soviet Union was built on the socialist ideology, and all the industries that used to work under the government. Now, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, capitalist system was to be established in all these countries. Shock therapy was a provision to hand over all government industries to private hands by auction. So in other words, turning the government sector into a private sector was shock therapy. What was the purpose of the shock therapy? Privatization of the state estates, free trade, connecting the Soviet countries to the Western economies was the main purpose of shock therapy. What are the results of the shock therapy? The shock therapy resulted completely unsuccessful. Russia's industrial structure collapsed completely. That resulted in the fall in Russian currency ruble. It also brought destruction of social welfare system that existed in Soviet Union. Big companies were sold at very low price. It increased in economies inequality or economic inequalities. There was a severe food crisis, encouraged black marketing, history's largest garage sale. Shock therapy was called the biggest garage sale in the history because big companies were sold at the price of junk. So, the shock therapy was a complete disaster in converting the government owned estates into private industrialist properties. Why did this happen? This happened because all the citizens were given vouchers to participate in the auction, and these vouchers were sold by those citizens to the black marketers because they needed money, and at the same time they were not in a position to participate in this sale. This was the reason why all the vouchers went into the hands of black marketers, and they have auctioned the big large factories for very low and simple cost. So this was the result of shock therapy. In this module we learned what was the purpose of the shock therapy, who initiated the shock therapy, what was the result of it, and why did it become unsuccessful, what was the reason of it. Stay tuned, we'll catch you in the next section. Welcome to this section, the last module of the course, communist countries and its relation with India. The relation between India and the communist countries have been good since the beginning. Russia has been helping India from the very beginning. Both dreams a multipolar world. Both countries believe in democracy. Almost 80 bilateral agreements were signed between India and Russia in the year 2001. India is one of the largest Russian arms buyer. India imports huge amount of oil from Russia even today. Russia helps India in many scientific projects. Russia always supported India on the Kashmir issue, where, as you can see on the screen, the Kashmir is being occupied by Pakistan, and the other side we have China taking some line into control. So whenever the issue of Kashmir comes for debate, Russia always stood as a support for India. So the relations quite good as far as for a very long period of time. Can also be considered they are going well. So that's all we have in this course. Thank you very much for taking up this course. Keep learning and keep smiling. Thank you.